January 1945. Cologne, Germany. The sky cracks with the scream of engines. The cold winter air rattles as a German ace, accustomed to easy kills, locks onto a distant American B-17. A quick sweep, and he's already anticipating another victory. Another clumsy bomber, another easy day. But something's different this time. A shadow emerges, slow and relentless. The P-47 Thunderbolt, the very machine he once mocked as a slow, heavy iron brick, appears in his sights. He dismisses it too easy, too slow. Then the sky erupts. The first burst of 50 caliber rounds tears through the air, slamming into his aircraft. No warning, no escape. Just fire. The radio goes silent. No call for help, no words, just the chaos of his final moment. The P-47 didn't fight fair. It didn't need to. It simply erased him from the sky. By January 1945, Germany is fighting for survival. The Allies have already invaded France and are closing in on the heart of the Reich. The Luftwaffe, once the dominant force in the skies, is running out of both experienced pilots and fuel. Their most advanced weapons, like the Me-262 jet and the formidable Tiger tank, are still in play, but they are growing increasingly ineffective against the overwhelming Allied industrial might. At this point, the Germans still rely on their elite pilots, the last remnants of a once unbeatable force. The Luftwaffe pilots have faced wave after wave of American and British bombers, and their success has been built on speed, agility, and the precision of their attacks. But their confidence is slipping. The skies are becoming more hostile with each passing day. The Allies, led by the United States, have adapted quickly and are turning the tide. For the U.S., the war in the air is more than just tactical victories. It's a race to secure air superiority, to protect their bombers, and to pave the way for the final assault on Germany. The P-47 Thunderbolt, once seen as an underdog in the dogfights, is now their heavy hitter, a symbol of raw firepower and durability. The Thunderbolt may not be the fastest or the most agile fighter, but it is a weapon designed to deliver pain in concentrated bursts. Its 50 caliber machine guns can rip through enemy aircraft with devastating efficiency. The Germans, however, still believe their experience and the might of their legendary fighters will keep them in control. They see the P-47 as an oversized, sluggish American bomber escort, a flying brick not worthy of serious consideration. But this misjudgment will come at a heavy cost. As the Germans continue to underestimate the capabilities of the Thunderbolt, they fail to grasp the shifting balance of power. The Allies have learned from their mistakes, adapting to each new German tactic, and now they have a counter for everything, including the Luftwaffe's most skilled pilots. The time for myths is over. Now it's about who can endure, who can outfight the other, and who has the power to change the course of the war. If the P-47 can overcome its early reputation and prove itself in these deadly encounters, it will mark the beginning of the end for German air superiority. The Thunderbolt represents the shift from the myth of invincibility to the cold reality of war. This is not just another fight for control of the skies. It's the moment when Germany's air forces lose their ability to strike fear into their enemies. The stakes are simple. If the U.S. can break the myth of the Luftwaffe's dominance, it could accelerate Germany's collapse. But if the Germans can hold on and destroy enough Allied aircraft, they might buy the time needed to regroup and recover. The question is, can the P-47 Thunderbolt punch through the myth? In the icy skies above Cologne, two forces collide: the Luftwaffe's elite pilots and the American Thunderbolt, built not for grace, but for destruction. The German ace, flying the Messerschmitt Bf-109, has no reason to fear the P-47 Thunderbolt. The Bf-109 is sleek, fast, and built for quick, precise attacks. It's the ideal dogfighter, with a top speed of 396 miles per hour and a climb rate that leaves slower aircraft in the dust. But even with its impressive performance, the Bf-109's 20mm cannons, though deadly, don't have the sheer punch of the P-47's weaponry. The Bf-109's advantage lies in agility, with a tight turning radius and a high-speed dive that can quickly close the gap between it and an enemy bomber or fighter. It's a machine designed to take advantage of the enemy's mistakes, darting in and out of combat with surgical precision. But then there's the P-47 Thunderbolt. It's a different beast entirely. At nearly 120,000 pounds and a wingspan of 41 feet, it's a massive muscular aircraft compared to the nimble Bf-109. It's slow by comparison with a top speed of around 433 miles per hour, but it doesn't need to be fast to be effective. It's designed to deliver punishing firepower and endure more punishment than any other fighter in the skies. The P-47's 8.50 caliber Browning M. 2 machine guns mounted in the wings can deliver up to 800 rounds per minute of pure destruction. Each round weighing nearly 45 grams and carrying enough kinetic energy to tear through aircraft armor can cause catastrophic damage when fired in bursts. From 200 yards, the Thunderbolt's fire can tear through the fuselage of a Bf-109 inches an instant. The sustained fire from the 50 seconds can cripple even the most formidable German aircraft, forcing it into evasive maneuvers that the Bf-109's superior agility can't escape fast enough. In terms of armor, the P-47 is built like a fortress. The cockpit is surrounded by thick, bulletproof glass, while the fuselage is reinforced to withstand hits that would bring down a lighter aircraft. The P-47 doesn't just rely on its firepower, it can take hits and keep fighting. Its self-sealing fuel tanks and heavy construction mean it's often able to return to base even after absorbing damage that would destroy other fighters. Unlike earlier American fighters like the P-51 Mustang, which are designed for speed and maneuverability, the Thunderbolt is designed to endure and outlast. The P-47's thick skin makes it an intimidating presence in the air, and its large radial engine, the Pratt & Whitney R2800, gives it the power to carry heavy ordnance and maintain speed while withstanding combat. Stress. This is why the P-47 is often described as a flying tank. While the Bf-109 might be able to outmaneuver it, it can't stop the P-47 from delivering its deadly payload. When the P-47's pilot finds his target, the battle is already over. For the German ace, this is an unfamiliar reality. The Bf-109 pilot is used to being the aggressor to dictating the terms of the fight. He can outmaneuver the slower P-47 or so, he thinks. But this battle is about more than agility or speed. It's about firepower, survivability, and pressure. The P-47's pilots have learned quickly that once they've got their sights on a target, they can unleash a deadly barrage. The heavy machine guns tear through their targets with a speed and intensity that most German pilots aren't prepared for. The German ace, who has spent his career relying on quick strikes and evasive maneuvers, now faces a fighter that doesn't flinch under pressure. The P-47 doesn't rely on surprise, it relies on brute force. It doesn't need to outmaneuver the Bf-109, because its guns deliver destruction before the enemy can react. At 200 meters, a Bf-109 pilot might feel invincible as he prepares for the kill, thinking he has time to line up his shot. But with the P-47, that assumption is fatal. The P-47's guns can strike first with deadly accuracy. And when the P-47 locks onto a target, it's not just a burst of fire, it's a sustained barrage that leaves no room for error. The Bf-109's lighter, faster approach is its greatest strength, but it's also its greatest weakness when faced with the P-47's relentless power. This battle isn't about one-on-one combat in the traditional sense. The P-47 and the Bf-109 are not evenly matched in terms of speed or agility, but when you stack the numbers, the weight of the Thunderbolt's guns, the size of its frame, its sheer resilience, the result is inevitable. The German ace may be able to dodge the P-47's initial shots, but he won't be able to dodge the weight of the P-47's gunfire when it closes in. It's a cold, hard reality. When the P-47 Thunderbolt meets the Bf-109 inches, the skies over Germany, the ace is facing not just a fighter, he's facing a machine built for survival. The sky over Cologne is still the only sound coming from the low hum of the Bf-109's engine. Lukas, the German ace, breathes steadily, eyes narrowing as he surveys the scene through his cockpit. The throttle is steady under his grip, his fingers lightly resting on the controls. The enemy B-17 bomber is in his sights just as he's seen dozens of times before. This will be easy, he thinks. The familiar rhythm of the attack already in his blood. His mind works swiftly, processing the angles, the wind, the target. He's done this 1,000 times. His Bf-109, a sleek killing machine, dives sharply. He feels the weight shift as the aircraft's nose tips down, the G-forces pressing into his chest. His hands, trained through countless engagements, are calm and precise. He's done this in his sleep. Another bomber, another easy kill. Then, out of nowhere, something shifts. Lucas feels the first instinctive tug in his gut, a sensation he's not used to. There's a sound in the distance, a low hum, and before he can react, the P-47 Thunderbolt appears in his peripheral vision, an unmistakable shadow gliding into view. An American fighter. It's too slow. It's no threat. But as he refocuses, something is wrong. It's not moving like any American fighter he's faced before. The Thunderbolt is closing in steadily, relentlessly. The Bf-109's agile frame is fast, but Lucas knows it can't outrun this thing. Not this time. He punches the throttle forward, trying to shake the bomber in his sights, diving into a steep turn. But the P-47 follows. It's too large, too slow. It should be too slow to keep up. He grits his teeth, leaning into the turn, hoping to outmaneuver it to break free. The P-47's heavy frame, a lumbering brute, should have been easy to avoid. But it's not. He pulls back on the stick, diving deeper, pushing the throttle to its limit. The G-forces press his body into the seat, his vision blurring slightly. I can lose it. I can outmaneuver it. Lucas thinks his focus narrowing to the throttle, the horizon, the chasing Thunderbolt. But the P-47 stays with him like a shadow that won't break. The pilot inside, steady, calculating, unflinching, has the Thunderbolt locked in place inch by inch, no matter how Lucas moves. And then, the world changes. Suddenly there's a flash of light, and before Lucas can react, a sudden shock slams into the side of his aircraft. His right wing jerks violently, and the aircraft shudders as if it's been hit by a freight train. The force of it sends a jolt of panic up his spine. His hands fly to the controls, but nothing feels right. He can't think, can't breathe. His eyes dart across the cockpit, trying to make sense of what's happening. Smoke. Screams of metal twisting. The noise is deafening, the sound of rounds puncturing his aircraft, tearing through the wings, the fuselage ripping into the cockpit. A loud bang rips through his helmet, and his face is slammed into the instrument panel. The moment feels like an eternity. His hands jerk in panic, trying to pull the controls in every direction, but the Bf-109 won't respond. His mind races. What the hell just happened? The radio crackles, but it's just static. Lucas's breath catches in his throat as he tries to get the plane under control, but the damage is too much. The P-47 has hit him, not once, but repeatedly, and now his aircraft is spiraling out of his control. The hydraulic systems are failing, and he can feel the left wing beginning to bend. Lucas looks through the shattered canopy, eyes wild. The P-47 is still there, its guns blasting a machine of pure destruction. The words he had thought, the myths he had trusted, fade in the background. The Bf-109's engine sputters. There's no power left. He tries to steer, to climb, to get any control back. But it's too late. The P-47 had followed him methodically, surgically, and now it has rendered him helpless in a way Lucas never imagined. He doesn't have time to think about his past victories. All he feels now is terror and a strange, cold sense of finality. His vision narrows. The fire in his engine, the smoke in his cockpit, the shuddering of his controls, it's all too much. Lucas reaches for the ejection lever. His hands are trembling now, a moment of doubt creeping in. The thought of ejecting feels foreign, something he never thought he'd have to do. His body is stiff, his mind racing with disbelief. The P-47's relentless presence is still there, he knows he won't get away. The American fighter has taken the myth of the Luftwaffe's invincibility and turned it to dust. He knows in that moment the legend is over. No escape. The thought flashes through his mind just before the world goes dark. The myth of invincibility that Lucas and so many of his fellow Luftwaffe pilots believed in is shattered by a fundamental truth of war. Combat isn't just about skill or bravery. It's about systems. The war was never going to be won by individual dogfights. It was always a battle of systems, the industrial might of the United States against the dwindling resources of Germany. The American ability to adapt, innovate, and replace losses was a system that the Germans simply could not match. In the early days of the war, Germany's military doctrine had placed heavy emphasis on the speed and precision of their weapons, from the Luftwaffe's advanced fighter aircraft to the Panzer Division's shock tactics. The German war machine was efficient, fast, and designed to strike before the enemy could react. Their weapons, like the Me-109 and Tiger I tank, were seen as the pinnacle of engineering. But that same efficiency came at a cost. Germany could only produce so many. Each machine was precious, each ace invaluable. The Germans had long been forced into a defensive posture, but their self-image, especially among their most experienced pilots, remained one of overwhelming superiority. In contrast, the Americans approached the war with an industrial mindset. Early in the war, they faced difficulties. Their early tank models were insufficient, and their bombers were often vulnerable to the skilled German pilots. But the United States learned fast, adjusting both doctrine and manufacturing processes to meet the demands of war. In 1941, the P-47 Thunderbolt entered the picture, a heavy, rugged fighter, designed not just to be an escort, but to outlast the enemy. This was a fighter that didn't need to be the fastest or the most agile. It needed to endure. The development of the P-47 Thunderbolt was born from necessity. The U.S. Army Air Forces, USAAF, had struggled to keep their bombers safe from the ever-encroaching Luftwaffe. The solution was not to make a faster fighter, but one that could stay in the air longer, take more hits, and keep delivering damage. The Pratt & Whitney R2800 engine in the P-47 provided immense power, allowing it to carry both bombs and a massive array of 50-caliber Browning machine guns. Its wings were large enough to absorb the recoil from the heavy armament, and the entire aircraft was reinforced to endure long missions and heavy punishment. For the Germans, the strategic challenge was different. They could not match the Americans in terms of industrial output. The Bf-109 and the Focke-Wulf 190 were both formidable machines, but each had limitations. The Me-262, the first operational jet fighter, was far superior in terms of speed and firepower, but it came too late in the war to change the tide. More importantly, Germany simply couldn't produce enough of them, and their quality control suffered as the war stretched on. This was the crucial difference. By 1944–45, the U.S. industrial machine was producing aircraft at an unprecedented rate. In 1944 alone, the U.S. produced over 3,000 aircraft, with the P-47 among the most prolific. At the same time, Germany was struggling to replace its losses, both in terms of aircraft and pilots. By the end of the war, the Luftwaffe had lost over 7,000 pilots, with many of the experienced aces gone, replaced by less experienced, often hastily trained replacements. The Germans, despite their initial technological superiority, couldn't keep up. The American manufacturing capacity overwhelmed them. The P-47 wasn't just a fighter, it was part of a greater system, one that integrated mass production, logistics, and continuous innovation. The U.S. could replace its losses, develop new tactics, and push forward relentlessly. The Germans, on the other hand, had no such luxury. The Tiger tank, once a symbol of German engineering, might become a liability because the Germans couldn't afford to lose them. Each tank had to be carefully guarded, each pilot carefully chosen, and each aircraft treated like a precious asset. The P-47's resilience in battle is a reflection of this broader industrial strategy. The Americans understood that survivability was just as important as offensive power. The P-47's thick armor, its ability to absorb damage, and its sheer firepower made it more than a match for the Luftwaffe's elite pilots. And it wasn't just the Thunderbolt. The entire American air strategy was designed around force multiplication, which meant not just building better planes, but also integrating them into a system of training, support, and logistics that the Germans couldn't match. On the ground, the American logistics machine was another crucial factor. The US could deploy and sustain forces at a scale that Germany couldn't hope to match. With the Red Ball Express, the Allies created a logistical lifeline that kept supplies flowing to the front lines, ensuring that the troops, tanks, and planes always had what they needed to keep fighting. Meanwhile, the Germans were increasingly constrained by shortages of fuel, spare parts, and skilled labor. Their once advanced weapons systems, like the Tiger tank, now became burdens instead of assets. The tanks consumed vast amounts of fuel and required constant maintenance, and the Germans had no way to replace them at the same rate the Allies could produce theirs. This logistical advantage allowed the Allies to focus on their primary objective, destroying the German war machine. While German tanks and aircraft were slowly decimated in combat, the U.S. industrial system produced new ones faster than the Germans could destroy them. The P-47 Thunderbolt wasn't just a product of engineering, it was a product of a system that could sustain it in battle, repair it when it broke, and replace it when it fell. But the Germans, trapped by a combination of limited resources and a failing strategic vision, were running out of options. As Lucas and his fellow pilots continued to face the P-47 seconds, they began to see the futility of trying to outgun or outmaneuver these American aircraft. The Thunderbolt's resilience in battle, paired with the overwhelming American production capacity, had shifted the balance of power in the skies over Europe. The Luftwaffe's myth of invincibility was crumbling not because of any single battle or pilot, but because the systems supporting the Allies were simply too robust. Germany's desperation was evident in their shift towards ever more extreme measures, such as the Me-262 jet fighter and the V-2 rocket. These were technological marvels, but they were also the last desperate throes of a crumbling empire. The P-47 inches contrast was a product of America's industrial pragmatism, and its simple, effective design meant it could be mass-produced, repaired, and deployed faster than the Germans could even dream of matching. The battle of the skies over Germany was no longer about technology alone. It was about systems. The industrial and logistical capabilities of the Allies had tipped the scales in their favor, and the German ace, once confident in his superiority, was now caught in a world where he was simply outgunned and outlasted. Lucas's last thoughts were a mix of disbelief and resignation. The once unshakable myth of Luftwaffe superiority had dissolved before his very eyes, as the American P-47 Thunderbolt tore through his aircraft, with a relentlessness that could not be avoided or outmaneuvered. In that split second, his world shifted from confidence to pure shock. The once dominant Germans were no longer invincible. The myth died here. What had once been considered an unstoppable force, the German ace, the Luftwaffe's finest, was now merely prey. The belief in the invincibility of the German fighter, upheld by years of victories, had been shattered by the cold reality of American industrial power and strategic adaptability. For years, pilots like Lucas were told they were the tip of the spear, unbeatable in the sky. But the arrival of the P-47 and the American ability to churn out more aircraft faster than the Germans could shoot them down proved that myth wrong. The aura of invincibility was gone. It was a psychological blow as much as a physical one. German pilots, accustomed to dominating the skies and breaking the will of their enemies, suddenly found themselves in a new world, one where the rules had changed, and they were no longer the dominant force. The P-47 didn't rely on speed the way the German aircraft did. It didn't rely on agility either. What the P-47 had was endurance, firepower, and the ability to soak up punishment and keep fighting. The very essence of what German pilots had feared most, the ability of their enemies to keep coming at them, no matter how many were lost, had come to fruition. Lucas had been trained to respect the myths, the legend of the unbeatable Bf-109, the impenetrable armor of the Tiger tank, and the Luftwaffe's dominance over all other forces in the air. He believed in them because he had seen them work, time and again. The myth was reinforced by history, by victories in the early years of the war, by the awe of their opponents, who were unable to challenge their superiority. But now Lucas was caught in the break of that myth. As his aircraft spiraled toward the ground, the sheer weight of the moment began to sink in. The Luftwaffe's tactical superiority, the very thing that had held them at the top for so long, had been rendered obsolete by the Americans. The myth of invincibility, passed down through generations of pilots, commanders, and war planners, was no longer the foundation of German doctrine. Lucas had fallen, and with him the belief that they were untouchable. The Thunderbolt's power, its sheer, unyielding ability to endure and destroy, was no longer just a strategic advantage. It was a symbol. It was a physical manifestation of the crushing industrial might that had turned the tide of the war in the West. The Germans, despite their technology, were no longer the top of the food chain. Their technological edge, once seen as invulnerable, was now a target. The P-47 was no longer a mere escort. It was a statement. The German myth had been broken. The moment Lucas's aircraft exploded into a ball of fire, it wasn't just another kill. It was a direct challenge to everything that German pilots had believed. They had relied on their skill, their superior tactics, their mythic weapons, and their legendary pilots. But now they were facing an opponent that didn't care about their myths. The P-47 didn't need to be faster or more agile. It just needed to hit harder, and it did. The Luftwaffe's pilots, one by one, would feel that same shift in the air. They would see their fellow aces fall. They would hear the engines of their Bf 109 seconds sputter out the sky, filled with the roar of American bombers and P-47 seconds that just kept coming. They would realize that the unbeatable had become just another casualty of the war. By the time the Allies pushed through Germany, this sense of psychological collapse would only intensify. The Germans were no longer fighting to win, they were fighting to survive. And with every P-47 that tore through the sky, they could feel the myth slip further and further away, replaced by the stark reality that no amount of elite skill, no amount of advanced technology would save them from the industrial machine of the United States. As the war turned in favor of the Allies, it became clear that this collapse of myth wasn't limited to the skies. The Tigers, the once feared tanks, were no longer unstoppable. The Luftwaffe jets could no longer achieve air superiority, and the German Wehrmacht was outgunned, outproduced, and overwhelmed. Each defeat from the skies to the ground was a public execution of the myth that Germany had crafted about itself. We are no longer invincible. It was a thought that echoed through the minds of German soldiers, pilots, and civilians. But they weren't just fighting against the Allies anymore. They were fighting against the collapse of everything they had been taught to believe in. The P-47 had not only destroyed Lucas's aircraft, but it had destroyed the very idea that the Germans would always control the skies. The myth of the invincible German war machine had died. In the chaos of that shift, the P-47 Thunderbolt became a symbol of the crushing force of reality. The Germans could no longer pretend to be the monster they once thought themselves to be. The American machine had broken through their defenses, and it was a reality they could no longer ignore. The myth died here, in the skies above Cologne. We are no longer invincible. And that thought would reverberate through the minds of every German soldier as they watched their world crumble piece by piece until they had nothing left but the bitter realization that they had been outlasted. In the aftermath of the battle over Cologne, the repercussions of that fateful moment extend far beyond the destruction of a single aircraft. The collapse of the myth of German invincibility marked a pivotal shift in the dynamics of the war, one that would reverberate across Europe and beyond. The psychological toll on the Luftwaffe was immense. Their once unshakable confidence crumbled with each fallen ace, each aircraft lost to the relentless fire of the P-47 Thunderbolt. The P-47's impact was not just tactical, it was psychological. As the Allies advanced deeper into Germany, the Luftwaffe's spirit had already been broken. Pilots who once held the skies in awe now found themselves outgunned and outmatched. The P-47 didn't just shoot them down, it obliterated their morale, leaving behind a sense of helplessness that would echo in the minds of German pilots and commanders alike. For the United States, the victory in the skies marked the beginning of the end for the Luftwaffe. The P-47 Thunderbolt's resilience and firepower proved to be more than just a counter to German air tactics. It was a symbol of the overwhelming power of American industrial might. The American war machine, with its unmatched production capabilities and strategic adaptability, had broken the myth of German technological superiority. The shift from defensive German tactics to offensive American superiority was now undeniable. The legacy of the P-47 lived on well beyond World War II. It became a symbol not just of aerial dominance, but of the broader American approach to warfare, adaptation, endurance, and relentless pursuit. The lessons learned in the skies over Germany would inform American military strategy for decades to come. As for the German pilots, the defeat in the skies was just one chapter of a much larger loss. The collapse of the Luftwaffe was only the beginning of the unraveling of Germany's war effort. With each loss in the air, the German war machine lost more than just pilots and aircraft. It lost the myth of invincibility that had kept it alive for so long. If the P-47 had entered Europe 6 months earlier, some historians wonder, would the battle for the skies have been decided sooner? In a way, it didn't matter. The result was the same. The war had shifted, and no amount of myth or technology could turn the tide back. Next, we move into the story of the Panther tank, once Germany's most feared weapon. But how does it fare when it encounters the American Sherman? Stay tuned as we explore the battle between two of the most iconic tanks of World War II.